stomping the earth, rocking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike cloth of destiny of a people with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery.
Good afternoon, and as always, welcome back. You know, folks, there's an urgent call to the world public opinion. Stop the genocide against the Palestinians. Stop the reemergence of fascism and Nazism in the Middle East and elsewhere. The Bandung Spirit Network has released a statement that opens as follows. 80 years after the defeat of Nazism and fascism, at the cost of tens of millions of dead and unthinkable destruction, humanity has been watching in amazement and horror for 20 months the revival of the ideas, methods, and practices of National Socialism by the Jewish state itself in the Middle East. What is the Bandung Spirit Network? And what are the connections between the Bandung Conference of 1955 and today? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. I'm going to forego today's usual headline summary. I want to get right to my guest. On today's episode, the issue before us is the Bandung Spirit Network and its urgent call to the world public opinion. Stop the genocide against the Palestinians. Stop the reemergence of fascism and Nazism in the Middle East and elsewhere. My guest is a professor of international law and history at the Geneva School of Diplomacy. From 2012 to 2018, he was the UN's independent expert on international order and produced 14 reports for the UN General Assembly and Human Rights Council, formulating 25 principles of international order. And the rest of his resume would take the remainder of the show to read. So let's just say, welcome back, Professor Alfred de Zayas.
And thank you for inviting me back to Connecting the Dots. And indeed, you picked an important topic because 70 years Bandung declaration, 10 points, is something to celebrate, and it's something to act upon. What I'm saying is we have the non-aligned movement, but what are they doing? Why do the members of the non-aligned movement, including Azerbaijan, for example, have flourishing relationships with the state of Israel? And they sell weapons, they sell everything to Israel. If you want to stop the genocide, well, cut Israel off. Not only break diplomatic relations, that is symbolic. Break commercial relations. Don't buy anything from Israel and don't sell anything to Israel. That will make Israel grind to a halt. And obviously, it's not just Israel, it's the United States of America that finances Israel, that supports Israel in the Security Council. Otherwise, sanctions would have been imposed against Israel for a long time. Now, all of these intellectuals who cooked up the doctrine of responsibility to protect, if responsibility to protect meant anything, it means stop the genocide. Stop Israel from doing this madness, but we're all complicit. The media is complicit. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, the BBC, the Times, Le Monde, the Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, even here in Switzerland, the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, they're all complicit in the propaganda in favor of Israel, in the inversion of cause and effect, in the false narrative that Israel has the right to self-defense. No. Israel has no right to self-defense against the Palestinians, but the Palestinians do have a right of resistance. They do have a right to shake off the yoke, the slavery, the occupation, the humiliation, the apartheid imposed upon them by Israel. Article 7 of General Assembly Resolution 3314. I'm talking about the concept of aggression. Israel is the aggressor. Israel has aggressed all of its neighbors for decades upon decades and gotten away with it. Why? Because the Europeans are complicit. The Americans are complicit. We provide them with military, political, economic, diplomatic, propagandistic support. It's not just the weapons that we send to them. Palestinians are being killed with French weapons, with German weapons, with British weapons, with American weapons. It's not just the weapons. It's everything else. All the lies created by the collective West to support a terrorist state. And I repeat it, a terrorist state.
But wait a minute, but complicit in what and why? And I ask that because we can go back to I think Alexander Haig is the one who said that Israel is the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that cannot be sunk. So, and I ask this not to challenge what you've said, because I agree with everything you've said. But if we have to peel back this onion to its core, all of the entities that you mentioned in terms of complicit and in what and why?
Well, complicit by the provision of the, shall we say, the excuses, the intellectual arguments that have been concocted to reverse reality, to make Israel the victim and not the perpetrator, to present the Palestinians as terrorists, etc., when they have a right to self-determination. The media and all of these collective West countries, Europe, Brussels, Paris, Berlin, and the United States, I mean, they have a propagandistic machinery that try to sell through public relations the idea that Israel is a democratic country. Whereas I say Israel is a terrorist state, has practiced terrorism since day one. It blew up the King David Hotel, killing 100 Brits at the time. They conducted, the Zionist groups in 1945, 46, 47, 48, conducted any number of terrorist acts against the Brits and against the Palestinians. They killed the United Nations representative, Folke Bernadotte, a nobleman from Sweden, and this led to a decision of the International Court of Justice against Israel, completely ignored by the press. When I mention it to my students, they say, well, how come I don't know that? Well, very simple, because the press is complicit in this crime. Now, let's go back to Bandung. Bandung was a great moment in history of international cooperation, African-Asian cooperation, based on the United Nations Charter. If you look at the 10 points of the Bandung Declaration, you see the United Nations Charter there. You see the same purposes and principles, the same commitment to peace, the same commitment to human rights, to development, to the right to development. And that's something that the West doesn't want. And the West has simply created a parallel narrative that, since we have so much power and so much money, we sell that narrative to everybody. And we have penetrated even the agencies. That's why I wrote my book, The Human Rights Industry, because the entire human rights system has become a business. And it is penetrated by the Mossad. It is penetrated by the CIA. It is penetrated by M16 and all of these intelligence agencies, the secretariats of all of these bodies, whether it be the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or whether it be the UNHCR, the refugee organization. They are full of ideologues. A person like me would never be appointed today, would never be recruited today, because I would be filtered out. They only recruit people whose ideologies are conform with Western capitalism. Those who are going to toe the line for Washington and Brussels. And in a very real sense, the United Nations has been in the service of Washington and Brussels. Why? Because Washington and Brussels have in the past provided the largest contingent of financing for the various agencies. Now, gradually, China, I think China now is the second greatest contributor to the budget of the United Nations. But money speaks. And we have successfully, when I speak, we are, say, the United States, and we have successfully bought the organization. Now that the organization rebels against us, that the International Criminal Court issues arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, now that the International Court of Justice issues 2 advisory opinions against Israel, telling Israel, your occupation is illegal, get out. and pay compensation to the victims. The United States doesn't want that. They say, their lackeys are rebelling. Their lackeys are not doing what they're supposed to do to defend the United States, to defend Israel. And what is most shocking is that the United States thinks that it can get away with it, that the United States thinks that it can impose sanctions on Karim Khan and the Secretariat of the International Criminal Court, that the United States can impose sanctions on Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur on human rights in Palestine. By the way, right now, for the last couple of days, there's been a conference organized by the Hague Group, a ministerial conference in Colombia, and it's been hosted by President Petro. And Francesca Albanese has been there speaking in order to find peace. And when I say peace, why don't we, in connecting the dots, why don't we in the United States nominate Francesca Albanese for the Nobel Peace Prize? Not that she's going to get it. Of course she's not going to get it. But the public relations impact, the symbolism of it, it might make some people think about it. Why should someone like Francesca Albanese get the Nobel Peace Prize? Well, obviously, she wants sustainable peace in the Middle East. A sustainable peace in the Middle East is only possible if we observe international law, if we observe the dictates of the International Court of Justice.
Let me ask you this before we get to further discussion about the Bogota conference. Is it too simplistic to put some of the analysis of the U.S. support of the settler colony called Israel, to put it in the context of a white supremacist interest in dominating the region, the same way South Africa was a white supremacist settler colony that became a country to dominate that region of the continent?
Not only, although that is part of it.
Okay.
It's in the United States. We are a racist country, no question. We are a country where ideologically people are looked down upon, the Mexicans, the Chicanos, the Nicaraguans, the Venezuelans. What are they doing here? Notwithstanding the fact that the United States is, by definition, a country of migrants, the only inhabitants of North America who have a millennium right to be there are the Algonquins and the Crees and the Cherokees and the Mohawks and the Iroquois and the Sioux and the Dakotas and Lakotas and Hopis, etc. The indigenous whom we massacred. And one important sentence that I quote again and again in my books comes from Martin Luther King Jr. in his book, Why We Can't Wait. Mm-hmm. At page 141, you read, our country, meaning the United States of America, our country was born in genocide. He says it that clear. And he's not talking about slavery. He's not talking about segregation. He's not talking about the horrendous crimes committed against the Afro-American population. He's talking about the indigenous, whom we call Indians, which is an additional insult. It's really adding insult to injury when we take the identity of the Crees and the Cherokees and of the Pequots, and then we call them Indians, as if they had anything to do with the Indian subcontinent. Now, I have great sympathy for India and for the Indian subcontinent, which played also an important role at Bandung. And this last conference is on the 70th anniversary of the first African Asian conference was held in Bharat, the Bharat Summit, and was organized in April this year in Hyderabad in India. So, I mean, I do have great respect for Nehru and for Mahatma Gandhi and for Indira Gandhi and the other leaders of India. But basically what we want and what we need and what we must work for is peace in the Middle East. We must stop Israel from aggressing all of its neighbors. 3 weeks ago, what happened? These attacks against Iran out of the blue. Israel has no right whatever to intervene in Iran. And if Iran wants to have the atomic bomb, as Israel already has it has the sovereign right to have it. It has voluntarily relinquished that right by becoming a state party to the non-proliferation treaty. But since Tehran is threatened, is menaced by Israel and by the United States, since Tehran has been attacked illegally, criminally by Israel and the United States, Iran can very simply denounce the NPT, invoke Article 10 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which specifically allows a country to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So even if Iran had a nuclear weapons program, even if they were trying to build an atomic weapon, that would be a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But the consequences are not being bombed and having its nuclear scientists murdered and having senior officials murdered in targeted attacks by Israel. It is a disgrace that Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, said in a cynical remark that Israel was doing the dirty work for us, meaning we Germans and we white Europeans, while Israel is killing these Untermenschen, these Iranians, etc., and making it then easier for us in the West. Now, that is white supremacy. That is old Nazi thinking. And of course, it is part of the equation, although things have evolved. It's not so much the color of your skin that matters. It's whether you are committed to the capitalist exploitation of the rest of the world.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Because to that point, when the German chancellor made that statement about Israel doing their work, the last couple of days, President Trump, in talking about Russia's increased attacks on Ukraine, said, and I'll paraphrase, I don't know what's going on with Putin. He's lost his mind. He's killing too many people, too many innocent people. And as soon as I heard that, I honestly said, I wonder what Alfred thinks about that relative to Netanyahu just leaving the White House.
You know, it is a cynicism taken to such a degree that I always feel like saying, "Stop pulling my leg."
But is it also an element
You
of
know,
dehumanization because to me, implicit in that statement is, well, then the Palestinians must not be human.
exactly. No, it is Zionism in its origin is fundamentally racist. The idea of Zionism is Israel for the Jews and only for the Jews, nobody else. So they want to create a theocracy combined with a secular capitalist system, but only for Jews. Which
and not all, only for some Jews. Not all Jews are welcome in Israel.
Thank God. And good that you mentioned that, because my friend Ilan Pape has written a number of very good books on the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians and on the terrorist nature of Israel from its very beginnings. As I've said in other interviews, nobody seems to remember that, as Martin Luther King said, our country was born in genocide. I would say Israel was born in terrorism, because they blew up the King David Hotel, killing 100 Brits. They carried out any number of terrorist attacks against the Brits in 1945, 46, 47, 48. They killed the UN representative for Palestine, Fokke Bernadotte, which gave rise to a case before the International Court of Justice, which condemned Israel for the killing. So you have a consistent pattern of terrorism that carries to this very day, because Israel commits terrorism against Lebanon, commits terrorism against Syria, and has been doing it for decades. Don't forget, what happened in Iran is not unprecedented. Back in September 2007, Israel did the same thing to Syria. Syria had a nuclear program, and Israel learned about it and bombed the hell out of it, annihilated it. Now, that was a huge violation of the UN Charter. That is within the definition of the concept of aggression. It's a crime against peace, Article 6A of the Nuremberg Statute. It is the crime of aggression, Article 5 of the Statute of Rome of the International Criminal Court, also according to the Kampala definition of 2010, which should be prosecuted. What the hell is the International Criminal Court doing, not investigating all of these instances of aggression, which is a crime in international law, committed by Israel with the complicity of the United States, with the complicity of the European countries, of the so-called collective West. And when the United Nations, or rather the International Criminal Court, issues an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and his former war minister Gallant, nothing happens. Even Hungary invites this war criminal to Budapest, receives it in Budapest, and notwithstanding the legal obligation to arrest him and turn him to the court in The Hague, he didn't. The United States, of course, is not bound by the Statute of Rome because we never ratified it. So we are not obliged legally to arrest Netanyahu. Morally, yes. But legally, no. What do? We rub it in. We invite this criminal to speak to Congress. I mean, all I can say as an American citizen, damn it, not in my name. This is a disgrace. This is obscene what is going on. And it continues. And it continues because the media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, the BBC, the Times, Le Monde, the Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, and the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, all of them are complicit. And all of them whitewash the crimes of Israel and put the blame on the victims. You may know that Tacitus, the Roman historian, back in the 1st century, he wrote many books. But among his books, there's one called Agricola. And in Agricola, he says, it is part of human nature to hate those whom we have injured. There's a lot of truth to that. We are told to hate the Palestinians. Why? Because we want to demonize the Palestinians. They are terrorists, they're bad, so that Israel can steal their land, so that the settlers can destroy the homesteads of the Palestinians, take their land, take their olive groves, etc., etc. It's pure colonialism in the worst sense. It is like second half 19th century colonialism, with all the massacres that the Brits did in South Africa and in Kenya and in so many other countries, that the French did in Senegal and in Mali and in Burkina Faso, etc., etc. I mean, the burden of guilt of Europe for its history of dehumanizing the Africans, exploiting the Africans, enslaving the Africans. I mean, it's breathtaking. We owe trillions of dollars to the Africans and to the Asians. Let's not forget that the British Empire exploited India for centuries, and that was a pretty nasty colonialism that the Brits imposed on India. And I would go further, because they used India as their, shall we say, base to attack China. China didn't want to have any trouble with anybody in the 19th century. And we wanted Chinese products. We wanted Chinese silk. We wanted Chinese porcelain. We wanted Chinese spices and tea and all sorts of good things. But we had nothing to sell back to the Chinese. So what did Queen Victoria, and I like to call Queen Victoria a narco queen or a narco empress, and I like to call the British Empire a narco empire. They started growing opium and then artificially creating a demand in China. So they smuggled the opium into China. And by the time the Chinese realized that they had a problem and they wanted to stop this opium trade, when they did, Britain declared war on China so that they could continue selling opium to China. I mean, that is a narco empire if I ever saw one. And China being weak in the 19th century, Britain stole Hong Kong and Kwangtung, and even made China paid reparations to Britain. Now,
similar to Haiti, similar to what France did to Haiti.
Yeah. the Brits don't want to hear anything about it. The average Brit has never heard about the Opium Wars of the 19th century, but the Chinese have not forgotten. That is an element that, we in the West think we can do things and get away with it. So, quod licet Jovi, non licet bovi. That is another Roman statement. Quod licet Jovi, what is allowed to Jupiter, what Jupiter can do and get away with. Non licet bovi, we bovines, we the cows, we cannot do that. Non licet. We don't have the right to do what Britain did or what the United States continues doing. That is, we are number one and everybody else is less than we are, notwithstanding the United Nations Charter, notwithstanding the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that declares all members of the human family to be equal. But that reminds you also of the Declaration of Independence of the United States when you say all men are created equal. But how about the African slaves? I mean, Washington was a slaveholder, so was Jefferson. So what kind of equality is that when you have a society in which you have equality among whites, but then the African slaves don't count? They're not human. The same thing. The Palestinians are not human. I mean, they are Untermenschen. I mean, this German word, this Nazi term, is something that we should use more often because it depicts exactly what Israel is doing with and to the Palestinians.
A couple of things. One, Kevin Baptiste, thank you for that super sticker and your point. There's no way of conveying to the corpse the reasons you have made him one. James Baldwin's famous quote. Absolutely right, and thank you for that. You're talking about the Opium Wars and England bringing opium into China made me think about the crack cocaine epidemic in the United States, as well as the weapons that were brought into our communities, and as chronicled by the San Jose Mercury News reports. And Cherie asked this question: what happened to General Petraeus? What did he say? And I'm not quite, General Petraeus has said a number of things.
Many.
But I know he talked about, right after Trump was inaugurated, he talked about Israel hammering Hezbollah, an Iranian proxy in Lebanon. And he expressed wonderment over Israel's. There were a number of things that he talked about in terms of Israel targeting Iranian and Lebanese diplomats and government officials. Do you have any insight into that?
Not really.
Okay.
I just observe it and I say, what level of cynicism, what level of just corrupt thinking is manifested by such statements. Israel had zero right to self-defense, and certainly to preventive self-defense that doesn't exist in international law. Article 51 of the UN Charter only allows self-defense temporarily limited and conditioned, and also with the principle of proportionality. You cannot go beyond the initial attack, but only if you have been attacked. You cannot say, I feel threatened, so I'm going to attack Iran. Well, by the same token, Iran could say, I feel threatened, and I'm going to attack Israel. Or any country in Europe could say, Russia could say, I feel threatened by Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania ganging up on me, and I will go and invade them. There's no right of preemptive self-defense. You need a prior attack. And with regard to Hezbollah, I mean, Hezbollah there is actually grounded on the popular will of the Lebanese, same as Hamas represents the popular will of the Palestinians in Gaza. And what must be hammered in is that the Palestinians have a right to be where they are. It's the Israelis who are not even Semitic. 80%, if not 90% of the Israelis today are Europeans, and they are so-called Ashkenazi Jews who are Slavs. They are not Semitic. They converted to Judaism in the 10th century, but they have no link whatever with the land of Israel. They have not even a historical claim to it. They are European migrants into Palestinian territory, and instead of assimilating themselves into the Palestinian territory, they have done what the Europeans did in Africa. The white Europeans go to South Africa, they take all the land and all the natural resources, they make slaves out of the natives. And thank God, at least in South Africa, it was possible to undo apartheid and to allow the majority black population to rule the country. But that is what must happen in Palestine. And I would like to know whether, since Benjamin Netanyahu keeps saying,
and his last name isn't really Netanyahu.
Well, he's a Polish Jew.
His grandfather's Milikowski is actually the family's his grandfather's last name is Milikowski because he migrated from Poland and changed the name of the family so that they could fit in at the cookout.
Yes, yeah. No, the whole thing is so corrupted by fake history. As I have written in my books, fake news matures into fake history and is then propped up by fake law, because our politicians invent the law as they go along. I mean, when you have American lawyers saying that Israel has a right of self-defense, no, she doesn't. She doesn't. I mean, the only people who have a right in international law to defend themselves, to resist oppression, are the Palestinians. So an occupier, Israel, and the occupation is illegal, according to the International Court of Justice. Very clear advisory opinion of 9th July 2004, advisory opinion 19 July 2024. The occupation is illegal, and they are obligated by international law, 1, to withdraw, 2, to pay compensation to the victims. But unfortunately, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, BBC doesn't tell us that. They keep magnifying the crimes committed by some soldiers on the 7th of October 2023, where no doubt there were crimes committed against civilians, Israeli civilians, etc. But those were, shall we say, classical war crimes, as opposed to genocide, which is the ultimate crime. Israel has responded to a rebellion, actually a legitimate rebellion by the oppressed Palestinians, and they have responded by committing genocide, by total war. Even if Article 51 of the UN Charter applied, and it does not, because Hamas is not a state, is not the army of a state. Hamas is a movement of oppressed people, a movement that has a right of resistance. Article 7 of General Assembly Resolution 3314. So that being the case, also reaffirmed by the International Court of Justice, there's nothing to discuss here. Israel just simply has to withdraw from the occupied territories and allow a Palestinian state to emerge. And if we want to look at history and go back to the origin of the state of Israel, when the United Nations negotiated with the representatives of Israel so that Israel could enter the United Nations, there were a couple of conditions. One of them, that Israel accept its frontiers and doesn't demand more. And number two, that Israel accept the existence of a Palestinian state. Now, it's been nearly 78 years since Israel was allowed to enter the United Nations, and it has systematically worked against the United Nations Charter, systematically worked against the principles and purposes of the UN Charter. Now, when I say Israel, I mean the government of Israel. In the Jewish people, there is a significant difference between individual Jews and their government. Same as you cannot say that all Germans in Nazi Germany were Nazis. They were not. I mean, people are people. They live in the situation they were born into, and they can't change that. They have no power. They certainly had no power to overturn or rather overthrow Hitler. Hitler, by the way, was never elected, whereas Netanyahu was. The best that Hitler ever got was 32% of the vote, which means that 68% didn't want him. So don't blame the 68% that didn't want Hitler.
Right.
I mean, Hitler was a clever man. His adjutant, Goebbels, was a brilliant propagandist. And his henchman, Himmler, was a cruel, nasty policeman.
And Goebbels was a brilliant propagandist who studied Edward Bernays.
Yeah.
The brilliant United States propagandist who many believe to be the grandfather of propaganda.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you bring that up, and it gives me a degree of optimism, because more and more Americans and Brits and French and Germans are seeing that the narrative that we have been fed is false. We're still not in a position to overthrow that narrative, because the New York Times and the Washington Post continue defending that narrative. But there are brilliant people like Jeffrey Sachs, like Dan Kovalik, like Stephen Kinzer, like the late Francis Boyle, like John Mersheimer in Chicago, etc., that say that's all bullshit. Sorry, that's bullshit. And they come with the facts in a very sedate manner and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those are the facts. That's a foundation. On that, you can build. And forget all the crap that CNN is giving you. And I must say, I do have a measure of optimism because there are very good people out there saying the right things. Unfortunately, they're not ministers. Unfortunately, they do not sit in government. In government, we have the crazies like Lindsey Graham. But look now in the city of New York and the campaign for mayor of the city of New York. It's amazing that this establishment, man Cuomo, could have been defeated by a newcomer. So things are shifting, and I hope that the momentum will increase, and that sooner or later we'll be able to get rid not only of the likes of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but also of the likes of this megalomaniac called Donald Trump. I don't hear you.
Let me go back to the point that let me shift the focus of that point to Israel, because there are many that will argue that Netanyahu has overwhelming support by Israelis, but I think that's somewhat off, because it depends on who you poll and it depends on the question you ask. Because,
and how you ask it.
Because I've seen a number of polls that say 70% of Israeli citizens polled did not agree with the way that Netanyahu handled the Hamas incursion on October 7th. And so your thoughts to that point.
Well, my thoughts, and I do have friends in Israel, there's no doubt that the intensity of the brainwashing by the media in Israel has led to a fairly thorough indoctrination of the population. I would think that most Israelis are so badly informed, and only those who have the courage and only those who have the curiosity to go beyond and to ask more and to look behind the veil, only those have understood the level of criminality of Netanyahu. But I would say a majority of Israelis probably still support Netanyahu. Why they would support him? Because they believe what the Jerusalem Post tells them.
Correct.
And I mean, if you live in that kind of a world, and that's why in the United States, even friends of mine, I was thinking in terms of intellectuals and members of the human rights community in Washington, D.C., with whom I've had contact for the last 50 years. And some of them who are intelligent people, but read the Washington Post every morning. They are, shall we say, so brainwashed that many things that are obvious to me escape them. They have somehow a mindset that we are the good guys, ergo everybody else is the bad guy.
Well, that's the indoctrination that is some of the very basis of their educational system. So they have been indoctrinated through their school system the same way a lot of white kids in the United States and in South Africa in the 40s and the 50s were indoctrinated. And that, to a great degree, is what Donald Trump is trying to do now with the elimination of the Department of Education and so many other things that they're trying.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Let me quickly point out that I got to thank Willie Hicks for his $20 super sticker and his comment. When your evil is only paralleled by your hypocrisy, what are you? The corporate interests that control the U.S., the U.K., and Israel, driven by the hunger for more money and power. And I think that ties directly to the point that we're making here. And they use indoctrination disguised as education as the cloak to do that.
Again, I do not like the concept of collective guilt. I think that guilt and innocence are by nature individual.
Okay.
Also, merit is individual. You're not heroic because your friend is a hero. You're heroic if you yourself have done an act that may be considered to be heroic. And you're not a murderer because your president is a murderer. You only become complicit if you approve it.
Mm-hmm.
If you, with all the necessary information, say, good that we whacked Tehran, good that we whacked Hezbollah and Hamas, etc. If you consciously say that, then you have become complicit in the genocide. You have been complicit in the aggression. And I would not blame the average Israeli for what the government does, as I do not blame the average German for what Nazi did. There's an important difference here, and I have not seen it anywhere mentioned by anybody else. To it, I wrote a book, by the way, called Völkermord als Staatsgeheimnis, Genocide as State Secret.
Mm-hmm.
Most genocides, they're so horrible and so disgusting that governments try to hide them, deny them, create an atmosphere of doubt about them so that you don't realize the magnitude of the crime. That was the case with the Armenian genocide. That was the case with the Holocaust. That was the case with Srebrenica. That was the case with Halabja in Iraq. I mean, the responsible murderers always denied it. Say, no, we didn't kill them, or we didn't do that, or it was somebody else who did it. As the case may be, all the murderers here tried to dissimulate the murder. What is unique in what is going on in Gaza is that it's completely public.
Yes.
We get it on television every night.
Yes.
What is shocking is that Netanyahu is applauded in the United States Congress. That's obscene. What is horrible is that he is proud of massacring women and children in Gaza. He is proud of saying, we are going to transport them to some humanitarian city, level of cynicism. Or even worse, Donald Trump, the idea of a Gaza Riviera. A Gaza Riviera without Palestinians, of course, a Gaza Riviera only for the super rich Americans and Europeans and Israelis. It is just so obscene. And it is public. I mean, that has made our societies complicit in the crime, unlike the Turkish society. average Turk had no clue about the Armenian genocide. The average German had no clue about the Holocaust. It was very well hidden. I mean, they were not killed in the marketplace in Berlin or in Frankfurt or in Hamburg. The Jews were very nicely put into buses or into trains, and they were allowed 2 pieces of luggage each. And then they were transferred to nice labor camps where they were murdered, away from the public eye. Here we have the murders done openly. No effort to hide it. And then when you say, as Francesca Albanese, our courageous special rapporteur on Palestine, when she says this is genocide, Donald Trump imposes sanctions on her. It is insane. In what kind of a world do we live?
What do you say? Can you give us a few more minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. And Norm Clement, thank you, my brother. Thank you very much for that $9.99 super sticker. What do you say? So, okay. So to the point about 2 pieces of luggage, putting them on trains and then exterminating them, that provided some levels, and I underscore some level, of plausible deniability.
Exactly.
Here, there is no plausible deniability. It's playing out every moment of every day right before our very eyes. People are being lured into spaces under the pretext of receiving aid, and then snipers shoot them in the eye. So what do you then say to organizations such as the Congressional Black Caucus that stand with the American policy, not only in Gaza, but in what I would consider to be a genocide in Haiti?
Yeah.
What do you say to? And I single them out because as Black Americans, they should not only know better, they should be better, they should do better, because the moniker that was assigned to them when the organization was first created was the conscience of the Congress, and they now seem to be unconscious.
Well, it's the same phenomenon that I have indicated in the human rights industry.
Okay.
They are penetrated. They are hijacked. They are instrumentalized to do exactly the opposite of what they're supposed to do.
Okay.
Juvenalis, the great Roman poet and author and historian of the 1st, 2nd century, he made a statement that is actually quite crucial. What do you do if the institutions created to defend your rights turn out to work against you, betray you? The Latin question is quid custodes ipsos custodes? Who is going to guard over the guardians? And my answer is only we can be the guardians, because our leaders, and I'm saying Antonio Guterres, I'm saying Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, have betrayed us. They're not doing what they are being paid to do. They're not doing what we expect from ethical persons. I mean, Antonio Guterres should have called this a genocide 2 years ago, because it was already a genocide 2 years ago. Same thing, Volker Turk. Neither one has dared to use the G word. They whitewash it. But if you want to stop it, you must stop every commercial relationship with Israel. And that's something that every single state can do. within its sovereignty, don't buy anything from Israel, don't sell anything to Israel. If you get the non-aligned movement in the Bandung spirit, if you get the non-aligned movement to boycott Israel, to break commercial relations and to break diplomatic relations. Of course, breaking diplomatic relations is mostly symbolic. It doesn't hurt that much. But if you break commercial relations and you don't buy anything from Israel, then they got a problem. Then who's going to pay the bill? The United States. I'm a U.S. taxpayer, so are you. So our tax dollars are going to go to support this genocidal state. But we need concerted action by Africa, Asia, and Latin America, by the global majority, to say we are not going to deal with this criminal terrorist state. And the United Nations General Assembly has the power, according to Article 6 of the UN Charter, to expel Israel, which is obviously in open rebellion against the United Nations and against the UN Charter. The resolution, I think, would pass.
So let me ask you this to that point as the final question, because the Bandung Spirit Network is asking A, expel Israel from the UN, 2, or B, recognize the state of Palestine, and 3, ask the Arab League and other entities to immediately dispatch a humanitarian mission. When you look at the statement from the Bogota conference, the Bogota statement was not nearly as strong as this one.
Yeah.
Why not?
I am a bit surprised and a bit disappointed, I must say.
Okay.
I expected more. Francesca was very clear. But again, she was not the only one at the conference. And there's still people who try to whitewash what Israel is doing and try to cast it as some form of self-defense. I mean, that is the language that we hear from Friedrich Merz and from Emmanuel Macron and from Keir Starmer, the right to defend yourself. But you don't have the right to defend yourself if you're the aggressor. I mean, that's what is obvious, but it's not what you get in the New York Times and in the Washington Post. But again, I'm very happy about this follow-up to Bandung, and I'm very happy about the Hague group that convened this conference in Bogota. Yes. I mean, it's a good sign, and it's about time that, say, the Hague group coordinates a boycott, an economic, military, financial boycott of Israel, and a disinvestment. I mean, every university, every pension fund that has invested in Israel should sell it off and just see what happens. How will Israel survive if you do that?
This will be the final question, and I think this is a great point from a member of our Connecting the Dots club, Peggy Parks Miller. She talks about white national evangelicism, and that is an element of this whole thing, or Zionist Christianity. This is an element of this whole thing that doesn't get nearly the attention that it should. And I think about the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who's one of those so-called Christian Zionists. Can take just a couple of minutes and speak to the power of Christian Zionism in this entire argument.
Well, To begin with, I'd like to tell you that I was a seminarian to become a priest, that I am a practicing Catholic, and that I believe in the message of the New Testament. I find that the New Testament essentially departs fundamentally from the Old Testament and from the idea of the chosen people of God. I reject the concept that a good God could create all of us and say, well, I have a preference for this little group, and they're going to be my people, and everybody else can go to hell. But
it's almost like Animal Farm. All animals on the farm are equal. Some are just more equal than others.
Exactly. But the thing is, if you read the Old Testament, which is largely obsolete, you read the Old Testament, you read the promise of the so-called promised land. How was that achieved? By murdering women and children. And the book of Joshua tells us that the Almighty was angry because they did not kill all the women and children. Some of them had been spared. I mean, the cruelty of the Old Testament is breathtaking. For me, the great civilization development was indeed the Sermon on the Mount, was indeed the idea that we are all children of God and we all can go to heaven if we love our neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
No exceptions. We're supposed to love our neighbor, to help our neighbor. But we are educated in the United States to believe that our neighbor is a potential enemy. We are taught to fear. I don't know whether you remember South Pacific and this wonderful song by Lieutenant Cable, when it says you have to be taught before it's too late. You have to be taught to hate the people your relatives hate. You have to be taught to hate the people whose eyes are oddly made. And I remember Lieutenant Cable doing this.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to hate the Asians because they have funny eyes. And it's a bitter song. But it is worth playing your old record of South Pacific and studying the text of that. We have been taught wrongly, and the evangelical Zionists have been taught wrongly. And unfortunately, because it's at a different cognitive level, it's in a different intellectual sphere called faith.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you know the quote of Tertullian, credo quia absurdum. I believe because it's totally absurd. I cannot get my head around it. Mm-hmm. So I just take it on faith, And these people take it on faith that the Israelis are the good guys and the Palestinians are bad guys. And it is a matter of faith, totally disconnected from reality, totally disconnected from the humanistic message of the New Testament. That's why I repeat, I am a practicing Catholic, and I believe in the brotherhood of all of humanity. There's no chosen people of God. We are all brothers and sisters, and we have to love each other. That is the message of Jesus Christ, which is totally different from the message of the Old Testament. Although I must say I'm a fan of some of the Psalms. I find some of the Psalms good literature. I find them very pretty. And also the wisdom of Solomon. If you look at Ecclesiastes, there are wonderful things in Ecclesiastes. Vanitas, vanitatis, omnia vanitas, that's come from Ecclesiastes. And there's another book that I like very much, which is the book of Ben Sira. Ben Sira was a Jewish scholar of 200 years before Christ. And actually, it's not a book, it's 51 books. 51. And one of the important sentences there is that if you exploit your brother, you are a murderer. Meaning, if you take advantage of your neighbor, this is mortal sin. I can send you the exact quote because that was the quote that made an encomendado called Bartolomé de las Casas, the Spanish. Actually, he was an hidalgo. He was there to exploit the indigenous of Cuba and of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to a sermon by Antonio de Montesinos. And Antonio de Montesinos ends his message with this appeal, and he says, but are they not also human? Talking about the indigenous. Are they not also, because of our religion, are they not also our brothers? And Antonio de Montesinos had made a reference to Ben Sira and to this quote, which I will send you, which was really crucial in converting this man from being an hidalgo to becoming a priest and actually the first bishop of the Americas. Bartolomé de las Casas. If you haven't read it, read A Brief History of the Destruction of the Americas. It is breathtaking. I mean, cruelty was not invented by Netanyahu. I mean,
but he learned it well.
He learned it well.
He learned it well.
What we did to the indigenous in North and South America
yes.
Is horrible. And I must say, for your listeners, resolution of the Human Rights Council 48/7. That is the resolution on the sequels of colonialism and imperialism. On the basis of that resolution, Africa has a right to reparations from Europe. India has a right to reparations from Britain. And certainly the indigenous of America have a right to reparations from Washington. And it's a question of mindset. When this finally sinks in, I think we have made progress. And people like you, Dr. Wilmer Leon, are bringing these ideas to a larger group of people. And that is my hope, that those people will change the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor de Zayas, for that compliment. Thank you for your work. And as always, I look forward to having you back.
Yeah, I'll accept.
Folks, again, Professor Alfred de Zayas, thank you very much. And also for staying up late, because it is late, much later for you.
Yeah, my wife came through the door a couple of times and said, come. Well, I'm going now.
And thank you and thank her for her patience.
Very well.
And thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Dr. Linwood Tawhid is going to join us tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show. You can find us all on social media. All the links are below. Remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. That talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because we're rhetoric free. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.